Well, in all parts of the UK, schools are closed to all pupils except for vulnerable children and those whose parents are key workers. Parents and carers are having to supervise homeschooling, with many lacking access to precisely the right technology and, in many cases, struggling with the cost. Our education editor, Branwen Jeffreys, has been talking to teachers, parents and pupils at a school in Stoke-on-Trent.
Empty classrooms again. Most children back at home.
Yeah, so Thursday we've got the Zoom session.
But teachers in school planning online lessons, learning packs for pupils.
Like that. I was quite shocked before I thought, if you know what I mean.
Angela can't believe it's happening again. She works an hour a day as a dinner lady. Now she'll have daughter Lily learning at home.
She'll sit there for 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and that's good if you can get her focused for 5 minutes. And then as the minutes tick by, she's gone. Watching a video, I've got to sit with her because she's looking around, aren't you? Spinning around, standing on her head.
Schools have spent the day working out how to help families. It's not just about moving lessons online. Some children are still learning on their parents' mobiles. And a day of pay-as-you-go data on lessons could cost almost £100, leading to calls for data for education to be made cheaper or free.
Some children we found in the last lockdown didn't access the Zoom.
Catching up with his head teachers across Stoke, even with schools contacting families, some teens lose confidence, log out of lessons, disconnect from learning.
What really worries me is where those students aren't engaged and don't connect and they're not there for learning, even with the intervention, what they're doing every day. Possibly they're not in the house, possibly they're on the streets, but the only thing that stops them walking is school. And without school being there, they walk in a different direction completely.
It's like at the moment we're shopping.
But many parents like Vikki are determined to do their best. With 4 daughters, that's tough. In lockdown, she'll have to help the youngest most, keeping going, worrying about what they're missing.
You should be with a teacher who is able to have their attention to teach them properly. As a mum, you can't do that properly because you're not qualified as one. Well, obviously, you do your best, you do what you can. But I think that's all it is with me, how it's going to affect their grades and then mentally.
More than 500,000 devices have reached pupils. The government is aiming to double that, with more on the way to help those not in class but at home. Branwen Jeffreys, BBC News.
Let's stay with schools because the BBC has announced its biggest ever selection of educational programmes for children who are staying at home during lockdown. From next Monday, there'll be at least 5 hours of programming on CBBC and BBC Two for both primary and secondary school children. And as schools are indeed closed to most pupils, ministers confirmed that this year's GCSEs and A-Levels in England are being cancelled. Scotland and Wales have already announced the cancellation of major schools' exams. Some vocational exams in England, including BTECs, are still going ahead, though there is growing pressure to cancel them as well. Our education correspondent Elaine Dunkley has been talking to some of those who are due to sit exams during the summer.
A daunting walk into the exam room, and for millions of students, there has been confusion over whether they'll take place.
It's just a bit nerve-wracking because I've not sat here since my mocks, so it just brings back all the memories of exams.
Millie's Level 2 BTEC exam in Sports Studies is still due to go ahead next week, but her GCSE exams have been cancelled.
Me, for one, I'm really stressed about exams because we've missed so much, and it's just really hard to motivate myself to get up in the morning because we've not been in a straight routine for ages, and it's been remote learning, and our disruption to learning's been getting worse, seeing as more people are getting COVID, and it's just been really hard.
We've covered not even half of the A-level spec.
Max Bamford is doing A-levels. He's been revising for mocks which were due to take place in 2 weeks but have now been cancelled.
So I think the issue is there's people out there who've not done as well in assessments within school and colleges they probably would have liked, who were relying on exams and mocks later on in the year to be able to get the grades that they needed. But then there's also students that have done really well in those that want teacher assessed grades. So whether you do some form of assessment or you do teacher assessed grades, there's always going to be sort of half of the students that aren't going to be happy with it.
I found it really hard. I only had a couple of weeks of online lessons.
Astrid Finley understands the pressures and anxieties. She did her A-Levels last year when a controversial mathematical model was used to determine grades but was eventually scrapped and replaced with teacher assessments. She's using her experience to reassure students like Max who are worried about their futures.
With my year group, we went through the algorithm system that was put in place by the government, and obviously that was obviously not effective at all. So hopefully, having gone through that, there's a new year group of kids who will hopefully have a bit more of a revised, a bit more of an effective way to produce these grades.
I really hope we do.
Tomorrow the government will outline how students will be assessed and graded.
And that's the big worry now.
For students like Max, the anxious wait for exam results day has been replaced with anxiety about what results will be based on. Elaine Dunkley, BBC News.